Good evening, everyone. Hello. Welcome to our listening session, LGBTQ Voices on Campus Coming Out Stories. This listening session is part of Shepherd's recognition of National Coming Out Day. National Coming Out Day is a celebration of the LGBTQ community as well as the coming out experience. So we've put together a lovely panel of our faculty, staff, and students to share their own experiences with you. So it's my job to introduce everybody. First we have Megan Ball, a second-year graduate student in the College Student Development and Administration Master's Program here at Shepherd. She's also currently serving as the Interim Assistant Dean of Students. We also have LaShawn Taylor, a second-year graduate student, also in the College Student Development and Administration Program. We have Ashley Angara, a junior communications major and the secretary for Shepherd Allies. Also, Emily Greer, a sophomore biology major and math minor, who is a resident assistant here on campus and the vice president of Shepherd Allies. And finally, we have Dr. Richie Stevens, who is the program coordinator.
Not finally.
What? Oh, I'm so sorry. We also have Blair, I'm so sorry you weren't on the list, okay. Who is the president of our Shepherd Allies. Then finally, we have Dr. Richie Stevens, the program coordinator as well as associate professor for our College Student Development Master's Program. Lastly, I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Dr. Tom Seeger, the Vice President of Student Affairs.
Thank you. Can we give another round of applause for Mia Card? Welcome. I'm so delighted to see everyone out tonight. So my job as moderator is to pose questions to our panel and give them an opportunity to provide answers. But I want to thank them for being here. I think it's so important that as part of human understanding that we share stories and we understand through dialogue, even though tonight most of the dialogue will be one way, and this is really about listening. I hope you truly listen and not just hear, but to listen and appreciate what will be shared. So my first question, I would like to start by asking each of the panelists to introduce themselves and explain how they identify. So we simply heard names and titles, so I want them to go a little bit deeper again and to introduce themselves and explain how they identify.
Toss it down there. And you may use the microphones that are on the tables, or you may use the handheld, whichever makes you feel more comfortable.
So staring at me, I guess I'll go. I'll yell. I'm loud. So I identify as a cisgender lesbian woman. Yeah, I mean, I really don't know how much else you want me to go into detail for that. Yeah, that's my identity.
We'll use the mic, I guess.
Go for it.
Okay.
No, you can use it. I'll turn it up if you want.
I've been talking all night, so use the amplification. Again, my name is Richie Stevens. I identify as cisgender and as a gay man.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I identify as a cisgender woman and I am asexual.
Hi, I'm Emily. I identify as androgynous and demisexual.
I'm Blair. I identify as a queer trans woman.
I'm LaShawn. I identify as an agender pansexual.
So I know as I'm listening and hearing I know there may be some terms that folks have questions about, and so I had a hard time hearing the last two introductions. And so if I missed something, please just tell me and I'll be glad to provide more explanation. So when we hear the term cisgender, hello. Sorry, I'm waving to a friend in the back. Don't pay attention to me. When we hear the term cisgender, folks often aren't sure what that means. And so I'll use myself as I identify as a cisgender man. And so when we think about gender identity, gender expression, and sex, at least in society, we're often taught that those line up a certain way. And we often don't actually name that. And so we identify folks who may identify as transgender, but we don't talk about cisgender. So it's important to note that it's when one's gender identity, gender expression, and sex typically line up in a particular way that's often considered the dominant. Other terms, I want to just take a moment to ask what questions might you have based on introductions from our panel. For any more clarification.
I think I've bisexual. I wasn't not familiar. Demi, I'm not familiar with that term.
Neither am I. So I would love to have.
Demisexual is the demi is because it's between like in my case lesbian and asexual. So I'm attracted to girls, but there is no sexual attraction for me until there is a really big emotional connection. And yeah, I'll talk about that later. But yeah, like not quite asexual, but also not just generally a sexual person, I guess.
Thank you. Okay. So the next question will probably take up a large portion of our time tonight. And I particularly think this is an important piece because this is where we get deeper into stories. And so since the topic of tonight's panel is coming out stories, we're going to ask each of our panelists to talk about their own coming out experience. You can start anywhere. It's all the awkward part.
We'll start on the end. Okay.
Okay, well, I really feel like I didn't come out until probably in the last couple years, but the first time that I ever said anything to someone about thinking that I was gay, I was 15 years old. But at the same time, around the same time, I got really involved in church and was very devoted to my belief in Christianity, and so much so that I wanted to be in the ministry. I even went to Bible college for a year. And when I came back from Bible college, I ended up getting into a relationship with a woman, and I lasted for about 6 years. And while some people knew about my relationship with this woman, I wasn't really open about it, and I wasn't okay with it. I actually had a lot of shame for a really long time about being gay. It was really hard for me to not feel like there was something wrong and that I didn't want to be not normal. You know, I wanted to feel like my life was the usual thing, and I wanted to believe that if I just met the right guy, everything would fall into place, it would all make sense, and then, you know, all this confusion that I felt that I had would go away. So I was in this relationship with this woman for 6 years, and eventually that ended. It wasn't a good relationship, but also because I just really did not want to be out. I didn't want to say that I was gay. And then after that, I ended up, you know, moving to a different place and kind of starting my life over, and I ended up having a kid, and I came here to Shepherd, and I just started going to school, and nothing in my mind when I came here to Shepherd was to come out and to be open lesbian. Like, it never was part of my plan at all. But, you know, I just started having these experiences of just realizing, like, how deeply, like, ashamed I was of it, to the point of, I just remember this time, and this was one of the biggest things for me that really, like, made me realize that
of how much I struggled with it was I was watching this video online of this couple getting engaged. It was two men, and my son was small, and it was definitely not an inappropriate video in any way, shape, or form. It was really sweet. And I remember my son, he's like 3 years old, coming behind me and looking onto the screen, and I just, shut it down really quick. And I just thought, oh my gosh, here I am wanting to try to teach my son, like, it's totally fine for you to love who you love and to be who you are, but I can't even watch this video in front of him, and he's just a little boy, and there's nothing wrong with what I was watching. And I just had this moment of like, I really just need to try to work towards accepting the fact that this is who I am and it's really okay. And I think the biggest part of that, which I'm sure other people will talk about, is losing the privilege of being heterosexual. But I think also within losing that is that coming out means you have to be okay with being willing to be judged. And that's really hard, at least it was for me. But ever since I was here, I had some really great people that I met along the way. Some were people that worked here. Some were people that I made friends with that I just started to open up and talk to them about it and really start to come to terms with how I felt about it and wanting to get to a place where I like who I am. I'm happy about being who I am. And just over the course of being here, I've had a lot of really great support. Some of those people are in this room. And so that's sort of how that's how I came out.
I'm not doing a dramatic pause, I just decided. So, as you can tell, I'm probably a little bit older than the rest of the panel. But I think that what you're going to hear is you're going to hear a lot of similarities in the stories, no matter what the time was. I was doing a lot of exploring today as it is National Coming Out Day, and I did tweet out that I had realized that next month I will have been out for 25 years. And it was a very different, that was, if you do your math, I don't know if you can do that real quick, but that was 1991. That's probably longer than some of you have been alive. But 1991 was a very different experience than 2016 in a lot of different ways. I had just gotten my master's degree and I was living in Ames, Iowa, that's in the middle of the state at Iowa State University. Prior to that, I can talk about not hearing anything really about gays, lesbians, homosexuality. I went to church regularly. I never remember, a lot of people have experiences where church denounced homosexuality. I don't remember it ever being talked about. I had nothing. I did realize that upon reflection that I was attracted to men, but I didn't have a meaning for that. And even as an RA, I was an RA at my undergraduate institution, and we went through training, and we talked about diversity. Sexual orientation was not talked about. And so when I got to my master's program, it really wasn't talked in the master's program, but it was talked about it in residence life where I held a hall director position. And I was able to explore that, and for 2 years really kind of began thinking about, well, there is a meaning to my attraction to men. And it wasn't until right after I finished, they switched all the graduate positions to full-time hall directors. And one of the women who was hired introduced herself and told me she was a lesbian. And so it was an opportunity for me to actually talk for the very first time in 20 plus years to someone who identified not as straight. My coming out process at that point moved very quickly. I came out to her. I initially came out as bisexual, and kind of what Megan was talking about with regards to giving up that whole concept of privilege. My idea of bisexuality was, I can say it's a phase. I can say that I can step back and take back that privilege if I have too many negative reactions to my story, to my experience. Luckily that didn't happen, although I kept that bisexual title for several more months. and finally got the courage to do that, to say that I was gay. But that whole process was still very isolating. I knew no other men who identified as gay or bisexual. And at the time, in order to find a support group, I had to drive over 30 minutes to Des Moines to meet with a group down there. And my staff, my supervisors were very supportive of allowing me to rearrange my schedule to take an hour out of my time to be able to go down there. But that was really the only resource that I had to begin to explore what that meant to be a sexual minority in the early 1990s. I stayed in Iowa until February of 1992. I'm from Virginia originally, and so my job search allowed me to go back and work at my undergraduate institution. And in those 3 months, I'd started kind of coming out. I mean, if you study developmental theory, I was kind of in that pride stage and was like, hey, I'm bisexual, just telling people. And I think part of it was that when you come out and you don't feel like you have an ownership with someone, that there's a deep relationship, it's much easier to come out to those individuals, because if they reject you, it's not as powerful, let's say, as best friends or family members. And so, but I had already decided at that point when I moved back to Williamsburg that I was going to make sure that part of my identity was known, because I thought it was just something important to talk with individuals about. And I got nothing but support. I think there were a lot of questions, because most people had never met anybody who identified as gay, lesbian, or bisexual at that point. Transgender was not even talked about. And then eventually I came out to my two sisters and my parents, and I chose to write a letter because I was not sure how they were going to react. And I decided that for me, that coming out process, because I was and I am very close to my family. And as many know, the stories that you hear are about rejection and ultimate rejection. And growing up in the family that I did, I had a large extended family, and that was a very powerful deterrent for me to think about what my life would be like without that kind of support, even though I knew that now I had the support of my working environment. But that went well. There were lots of tears and misunderstandings and growing, but ultimately the family said, you know what? Originally it was, we don't understand this, but we love you, and we're going to seek to understand this, and that's what's more important, because we want you in our lives. From that point on, as anyone knows, coming out never stops. It might get easier in some cases, but when you have that unconditional support of your family, which I was lucky to have, it made that process so much easier for me to be an advocate, an ally, beyond just kind of looking out for my own experience. So that's my coming out story.
I'm asexual, like I said before, and growing up, it's kind of funny, I've always been a hopeless romantic. I loved watching rom-coms. I was waiting to get a boyfriend. I was waiting to get married. I love the idea of, being close to someone and being like holding hands, doing stuff like that. But, funny enough, I was the last person in my friend group to actually be in a relationship. And when I actually did get into a relationship, it was really awkward. I was kind of uncomfortable. I had no experience. I realized I didn't know what to do, at all. And that relationship only lasted a month, and he broke up with me because I wouldn't kiss him. I wasn't ready for that. And a lot of my relationships, came and went in that way. All of them ended because I just couldn't bring myself to show physical affection. And a lot of people in high school were always bragging about, like, oh, I've been this far with so-and-so, oh, I've done this, oh, I've done that, and I couldn't relate. I couldn't join in on the conversation. I was like, yeah, great, but I never felt different. I don't think I wanted to feel different. I just told myself, Ashley, you're not ready for that kind of thing. You move slower in relationships. your relationships haven't gone that far, so you haven't gotten to that point yet, it's okay. And I told myself that for a really long time, until senior year, at the end of senior year, when I found out about asexuality. And I kind of looked up the definition, I read about it, and I was sitting there and I was like, oh, yeah, that's me. That's definitely what I'm feeling. But I didn't really accept it right away. I took the whole summer and I tested it out, if you will. I told only really close friends, and I did a lot of thinking. I sat there and saying, like, is asexual the term I want to use to describe myself? Is that how I'm really feeling? And it wasn't until I got to Shepherd where I officially came out. I guess it was kind of like what you were saying, people can't judge you if they don't know you. It's a lot easier to tell strangers than it is to tell, your best friend or your parents. So I remember sitting in my dorm room, my roommate, I had only known her for a few hours, and I just kind of went, oh, by the way, I'm asexual. And she was like, oh, what's asexual? And so I kind of had to explain it to her, and then she goes, oh, okay, cool, like, whatever. And I was like, I don't really remember exactly how I felt or what I said, but I just remember feeling really happy, like, this wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, kind of thing, like, wow. And so that was kind of my euphoria, where I just started telling people, like, I came out to, all of my friends back home, and I was coming out to, like, new friends that I had met, and everyone was just really accepting, and I was just really happy, for myself, and it was a really good time. But, being ace, I realized quickly came with a lot of challenges. First off, there were a lot of people who, I'd come out to them and they'd be like, oh, so it's basically like you're 12 years old. And I was like, what? Like, I was completely, like, flabbergasted. Like, just because I'm not having sex, that means I'm a child? Like, how does that make sense? There were people, I had the whole, like, oh, you're asexual, does that mean you can clone yourself? Like, I had to deal with all these dumb comments and explaining, and just, I had to sit people down and say, like, hey, I know you're kind of joking, I know I'm a funny person, I like joking, but, like, you're saying some like, you're hurting my feelings, can you not? And, and people, like, they didn't even realize. They were like, oh, I'm so sorry, and I had to have that conversation with people, which was, difficult, but it definitely helped in the long run. But more importantly, I was still a hopeless romantic, and if I ever wanted to get, a boyfriend, that person had to know. I had to make sure I was honest about, know what they were getting into, kind of thing. So relationships became a lot trickier to deal with, and I unfortunately learned that the hard way. To make a long story short, there was a guy, and we were in a relationship for a few weeks, and basically he left me because I was asexual. It was one day, we were best friends talking a lot, and then the next day he was ignoring me and going out to have sex with other girls. And it was a huge wake-up call. I was devastated. I felt, betrayed. I couldn't understand, like, he knew I was ace, but he decided to, date me anyway. And then all of a sudden he just kind of up and left because I was ace and I couldn't, I didn't give him what he wanted, in a sense. So it really hurt. It really hurt me. I stopped kind of trusting relationships. I took my faith out of relationships. I felt that, I couldn't be loved and be ace at the same time. And it was a really hard time for me. I even started closing up. I only talked about being ace with, like, really close friends. And, I wasn't as open about it anymore. And it took me a really, really long time to heal from that. Joining allies definitely really helped me, being around people who kind of knew where I was coming from. And I mean, now I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend for almost a year, and he gets it, and I finally feel loved and ace at the same time, and I'm opening up again, and that's really important to me. So.
Okay. So a lot of my coming out story has to do with being a lesbian because that's how I came out. And this coming out panel for me is a coming out panel. People don't know that I'm demisexual or androgynous or stuff like that. I put something on my Snapchat today that was just a pic that said they, them, there. And I was like, that'll get it out enough. So they're not completely taken back. But I realized during high school, like, that I liked girls, and I was also really religious. I was raised in the church, and when I started to come out to people, I came out as bisexual, and I was coming out as bisexual for a couple of months until I came out to one of my friends, and she was like, well, how do you know you're bi? And I described how I felt about girls, because that's the part that I thought that she was questioning. And then I was like, and guys exist, because you know how, like, in TV and stuff like that, girls are always like, guys suck, but we gotta date them anyways. I was like, that's exactly how I feel. And so I was like, yeah, so I feel the way every other girl feels about boys. And she was like, no, Emily, like, that's not how people actually feel about boys. Like, yeah, they suck, but we also, I was like, crap. So I had to, like, come out again as, like, actually gay this time. And I started to have a lot of trouble with my mental health. I was having a lot of anxiety attacks, like multiple attacks a week. And it got pretty scary. Like, they're very visible. I would scratch my forehead, and so I'd have, like, scabs on my forehead and, like, bruises all over my arms. And I remember one time, I remember one time, it's a pretty big day. My mom was talking to me, and she's like, I just don't know how to act around you. I don't know what's going to set you off. And me and my mom had always been so close. She raised me as a single parent until I was 14 when she remarried to my stepdad. And she was just like, I don't know how to act around you. I just don't, want to set you off. I don't know what, like, triggers you into an attack. And I started to, like, shut down. And she was like, why are you so upset? Why do you never want to be home? And I just said, I know that you and my stepdad's name is Aaron. I said, I know that you and Aaron won't like me anymore. Like, you guys are being so nice, you're being so supportive, and you're trying to do everything that you can, but I know that what I am is not welcome. And she was like, I have no idea what you mean. And I sat there for, like, it felt like 15 minutes. It was probably more like 3. And I needed to make sure. I was like, Mom, if I tell you this, I'm going to have to, like, leave right after, because that's what I do with confrontation. I just jet. So I was like, I'm gay. And we sat there, and she asked how I knew, and she said that when she was in college, she had a roommate who was gay, and one time she got drunk, and she almost kissed her, but then she couldn't. And I was like, Kelly, you were married and had a kid at that point in life, and I've never liked a boy. So that was unique. But I left, and I sat under a bridge for that day. I bought a lot of cookies, and I stayed in my car for about, like, 2 weeks. Sometimes I'd go home at night when I knew they were asleep, just so I wouldn't have to confront them. Because, okay, I went home the next night, and they didn't want to talk to me. And I was like, can you guys, like, not talking is worse. I was wrong. I was like, yeah, not talking is worse. And they said, they being Mom and Aaron, said that they could never accept or respect me, that it was like they'd been living with a liar for 16 years. I remember in a later conversation, my mom said anytime she looked at me, it was like there was a mark on my face, and this was all that she could see when she looked at me. Yeah, so it was a hard pass, big no-go. And so, yeah, staying in the car, I had a teacher offer to let me stay with her And I was like, gonna not do that, but thanks. And my mom wouldn't let me come out to the rest of my family. I have one aunt who at the time lived in America, but now she lives in Scotland, and I really wanted to come out to her because she's so accepting of everything, and my mom wouldn't let me. And yeah, we went to see my family over Christmas break one time, and my aunts found out, and the one aunt that I knew would be cool was cool with it. She was at Scotland at that time, and so I had to call her and tell her. But my grandma didn't find out. But Christmas break was when I cut my hair off. I used to have really long hair. And my grandma called me a dyke. And she was like, it's okay that I'm calling you a dyke because I have short hair too, so I can call you a dyke. That's fine. And yeah, that was really rough. And so yeah, I didn't really know if I wanted to come out to my grandma at that point. But then later she visited in West Virginia and confronted me by saying, Emily, why do you hate me? And so we had that combo and came out to her, and there was a lot of fighting. And then I came out to my grandpa, and he was really sweet and just gave me a hug. But the way that I came out to my dad was always a really bad part of my life. Honestly, people ask me the question, like, what made you gay? Then depending on how much I care about the person, if I don't care about them at all, I'm just like, my dad. If I actually care about them, then I'm like, that's not how it works. But my stepdad at the dinner table was saying, like, I really don't think gay people should be married. That's an institution that should not be infringed upon by gay people. And I was like, you're really impolite. And so I left, as I do. And I called my dad, and I was like, man, Aaron's a jerk. And he was like, well, what did he say? I was like, he said gay people shouldn't get married, and that hurt me because I'm gay. And he just said that he'd be more upset if I liked the Orioles. Sorry. So, yeah. So coming out to him was easy. It was over the phone though, so it was weird. But yeah, that worked out well. And I remember at one point I almost told his mom, but then I didn't because I felt like I had to ask him. And I was like, Dad, is it okay if I come out to Grandma Rosie? And he was like, why the hell are you asking me? Like, I don't care what you do. I was like, zoinks. But yeah, basically, I came out to my mom in junior year, and we didn't talk about it until last year. One of my friends who used to go to the school told my mom that I was dating someone, and she was upset. And yeah, I couldn't talk about it. She could never come over, and she had no interest in meeting this person or anything like that, which really hurt me because me and my mom are so close, and I've always wanted I knew that my mom and this girl had things in common. They both love HGTV. And so I was like, Mom, I really want you to meet this person. She's rad. Like, come on, please. And no way. And so one time I was FaceTiming this girl, and my brother came in, and he was like, who's that? And I was like, that's my girlfriend. And my brother's 5. I have a brother that's 5 and a sister that's 2. So at that point he was 4 and the sister was 1. So, kids make mistakes. He went downstairs and said like, oh, Sissy's on the phone with her girlfriend. No. And so my mom talked to me like a lot later. It was like a month and a half, maybe 2 months later. I didn't know that he had said anything. And he was just like, you can't say anything about being gay to Henrik or Lindley. And I was like, well, why not? Like, name my siblings. And she just said that he is at an age now where he can only see things in black and white. And so she wouldn't know how to say, Sissy's a sinner and going to hell, but we still love her. My siblings mean everything to me. I call them my kids, and it was hard realizing that I'm gonna have to have that talk. And I hope that they will side with me and be okay with it. But I'm not expecting it just because of their parents. Because I know, like, until I realized I was gay, I was like, yeah, I don't know if gay people should get married because that's how I was raised. And then I was like, wait, they should, and I am one. So yeah, that's really stressful, and so I just can't talk about that or anything. But over the summer, the girl that I was dating at the time and I, we were having problems and eventually broke up. And that was the first time I was able to talk to my mom about being gay. But it wasn't so much about me being in a relationship, it was about, like, how can I help this girl? Because she was going through a lot, and yeah, and I just wanted to help her. And so I was like, Mom, how can I make sure that she's okay? And that's the only way that she would talk to me about being gay. But yeah, so now, off of that part, I'm not a lesbian. And I've known that since high school, but nobody knows what demisexual is. And so sometimes I'll just say, like, that I'm a sex positive asexual, but that's not true. And, like, I always felt like it kind of invalidated my identity. Like, people wouldn't believe me, because whenever I told people I'm a lesbian, they'd be like, oh, so what about this girl? She's super hot, right? And I'd have to be like, haha, yeah, man. Instead of, like, I don't know, what's her personality like? So, yeah, I just felt really invalidated, and I was worried about being in a relationship. And there's someone that I'm talking to at the moment, and I found out that she just knew what demisexual was. And I was like, whoa! And then I was like, okay, we can hang. And with the androgynous, that's the thing that I've told the least amount of people. I told the girl that I was dating that I don't identify as a girl. And she's been really great in that. We're still best friends. She's there. But I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I identify as. And that was really hard because she was the first person that I came out to. And I didn't know what I was. I don't know necessarily if the place that I'm at right now is final. But I just knew that I felt really gross when people said girl or she or anything like that. You know, like, hey girl, no thanks. So I told her, and then I told some of my friends, like 3 of them, and they were all cool with it. But it's just scary because I feel like that's the thing that people can fight the most. Like, demisexual, they can just say, you gay, like, just face it, or you asexual, just face it. But with this, I don't know what they're gonna say, because this is the one where I'm not 100% sure. I know that I don't like hearing girl, but also it's not like I'm a boy now. That's not it. So that's the one that I'm really nervous about coming out. So I don't know how that's gonna go. But yeah, that's basically it. I'm in a transition state right now, and one thing, I can't come out to my parents as anything but cisgender, just because I know the reaction to being gay, and this will be so much more than that. So yeah, I thought it would just be something I keep to myself, because, like, I could tolerate the female pronouns, but I don't like them, and I don't know, it's scary. So I think that's it. Sounds good. I feel like I've been talking for a very long time. I'm really sorry.
Hi everyone, I'm Blair. I identify as a trans woman, but that wasn't the first coming out that I ever had. The first coming out that I had was in freshman year, and at the time I identified as a boy, and I told my friend that I liked this one boy, and I guess I told the wrong person, and I didn't have so much of a coming out. It's more of I was forced out. And in high school, if someone finds out that you like a boy and you identify as a boy, you're gay automatically. You don't even get to defend yourself saying you're bisexual, or you don't just have attraction to boys, which I didn't. I had attraction to girls my whole life, and I haven't had attraction to girls. So that was the first kind of coming out that I really experienced. So it wasn't very good in the aspect that I didn't get to be the one to come out. It was forced upon me. I came out during a time when I had gym class, and so all the boys that I was friends with in the gym class no longer wanted to be my friend or stand next to me in the locker room when we were changing because they were afraid I would, I don't know, fight them, I guess. So I identified as bisexual for a while, although everyone thought that I identified as gay, and I still identified as a man until my junior year of high school, when I finally came out to my entire school in like this big assembly that we had for all of the students at once. So that was stressful, but it went well. Everyone seemed pretty okay with it at first. People told me that they were proud of me for coming out in front of everyone at once. There was negative reaction. People would make snarky comments in class, or not push me in the hallways, but were shovey a little bit. People would pretend to ask me out as a joke. Things they're not really related. They're two different things. So, but my parents were always accepting and helped me transition, helped me pay for any hormones that I needed or any doctor's visits that I needed. They've always been super supportive, and I've never had an issue with anyone in my family, thankfully. I'm very lucky to have an accepting family, an open family about it. The most amount of negative responses I've gotten are from my peers, mostly online. People like to leave nasty comments on pictures or posts that I have, and kind of shrug them off at a certain point, because if you can't do it in person, you're kind of just a coward. So I would say that my biggest issue that I've had with coming out was acceptance with men more so than women. I used to be really good friends with a lot of men before I transitioned, and then after I've transitioned, I don't have as many male friends. I'm not really sure why that is. I don't really think that I've changed personally. I mean, outer appearance, yes, but I'm still the same person. I still like all the same things that I did before I transitioned. That doesn't change you at all. So, yeah, that's pretty much my coming out story. There's a lot of other things about like when I was a child that I have not talked about. I would ask people to refer to me as girls' names or girl pronouns, or like I would always go through my mom's wardrobe and then show her what I picked out. And she was never mad at me, but she always had me put it back exactly where I found it, because otherwise it would be lost. Yeah, it never was something that I had to question too much, because I was in a very accepting and open environment, and I could share who I was with them and feel no shame about it. So I'm very, very blessed in that aspect. So yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I think my story's a little long, I think. But I guess I'll start with the first time I kissed a girl. I was in kindergarten, believe it or not. And I guess I start that young because I mean I've just always been like younger, like playing house. I was always the dad. I didn't mind it. I always wanted to be the dad. And things like that. Always play with my brothers. Like, I'd rather play with their Matchbox cars than the Barbie dolls that I was given. I would chew the feet off of them. I didn't care for them at all. And like it was, but I guess getting older, the first time I realized that I actually, like there was a word for being attracted to the same sex. I was in about the 6th grade, and that's when I came out to my friends, like, oh yeah, like I like girls, just tell, that's when I like came out to my friends and identified as a lesbian, like all throughout middle school, and from like 6th to 7th grade, no one really knew, because I guess like I was still like dating guys, if that's a thing that you can do in middle school. I mean, like what is that even? But I do remember like watching music videos, and I was watching music videos with my little brother, and he goes up to the screen and was like, Sean, this one's my girlfriend, and that one right there, that's your girlfriend. And I'm like, just looking at him like, this kid is going places. Like he knows. So, and in that moment right there, it just made me think like, somebody, he has, he was like 3. So I'm like, he gets it. So everyone else, I feel like everyone else should have gotten it. They didn't. And when I was actually like in the 8th grade is when I actually had my first girlfriend. So that was an experience in itself. Especially because she was like 4 years older than me. But when in the 8th grade is when I came out, I started coming out to some of my family members. And I remember coming out to one of my older sisters. She was in the bathroom doing her hair, and I walk up to her, I'm like, Keita, like, yeah, I got something to tell you. She's like, what? And I was like, I'm gay. And she's like, oh, I could have told you that. And I was like, really? So I'm like, well, can you help me tell mom and dad? And she's like, okay. And I was like, all right, cool. And like one of my older brothers, I was like on the phone. He's like, who are you talking to? And I was like, oh, I'm talking to Sabrina. And he was like, who's that? And I was like, my girlfriend. And he was like, oh, snap, like for real? Like, so it was, it was fun. But I wasn't really, it was kind of another situation similar to Blair's, where I wasn't given the opportunity to actually come out to my parents. It was something that was more or less just thrown into the universe. Someone at school somehow, I don't know what happened. Well, I know what happened. The girl I was dating at the time kissed me in front of a lot of people, and one of those people ran back and said something to somebody, and it ended up getting back to my father somehow. And I remember like going home and getting a phone call from my mom, and because I kept a journal. I didn't write in that journal for like almost a whole year. Journals. Again with the, so it was a journal I had like from like middle school when I was like, when I was in the 8th grade. And she was like, oh, like, what is this in your journal? I read some things in it. So I'm like, well, what was you doing in it? And she was like, well, it was in a bag. Imagine my mom, she bought me like a book bag, pocketbook, and I just threw miscellaneous things in it and let it hang on a doorknob. Like it wasn't, I didn't know what to do with it. And she first said that, she was going in the bag and looking for some lotion, and the book fell on the floor and opened up to a page, and I'm like, like, get it now, like, did that really happen? So I was like, okay, whatever, like, what were you really doing in my bag? And like, so I'm like interrogating her about it. Well, I was looking for a paper, and I was like, well, you just said you was looking for lotion. And she was like, don't be like, so she gets mad because I caught her in a lie. And so she's talking about this, and then I hear another voice on the phone, and I'm like, Jesus, is that you? It was my dad. I'm like, what the? So it was like a setup. So I'm like, what is this? And I was like, well, I've liked girls like ever since I was like in the 5th grade. And my mom was like, well, you didn't tell me, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, look how you're reacting. So I can only imagine 5th grade me coming out to my mother and her reacting like that. And so my dad was like, well, at this point, like my siblings knew. And at this point, it was me and my 3 older sisters, and we all went to school together. He was like, well, how would your sisters feel if people went up to them and was like, oh, your sister's gay, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, they already know, so I don't think they care. So me and my, I guess, smart remarks just aggravated them even more. Because my dad came home later that evening, and he called all of my sisters down onto the steps so he can have a conversation with us, and some of my older brothers were at the top of the steps. And I promise you, this is the only part of the conversation I remember. So we were sitting on the steps, and he just started the conversation off looking at me. He was like, pussy makes you stupid. And I'm looking like, okay. I wasn't sure like where he got that from, because I was like a straight A student, so I was like, your theory is flawed. Okay, that doesn't apply to me. But he also went on to say that since I wanted to be a boy and I was acting like a boy, he was going to start treating me like a boy. When I got in trouble, he was going to hit me and all this other stuff. So I'm just sitting there listening to him blow smoke. And then the next day, we're on out, like, my sisters and I, we get into the car, and before my dad pulls off, he like goes on another rant. So I'm sitting there listening to him. Then he reaches over the back seat and he backhands me and says, "Get the F out my car. I don't give a damn where you go. Just get the hell out my car." So I get out of this car and I'm crying. I just start walking because I'm just like, all right, whatever. And I later found out he had no idea where I was, and I shouldn't have went to school because I just continued to scare the hell out of him. So I went to school, and I still made it to school on time. Don't know how that happened. Still made it to school on time. Got on the subway, and like my sisters, they were like at school waiting for me. So I walked through the main door, and my sisters, they all, baby, oh, you're okay, blah blah blah. And in my mind, I'm like, y'all not real. Y'all would have got out the car with me, but and like, so for the entire, and I told them not to let my dad know where I was until lunchtime. So for the entire morning, my dad had no idea where I was. So he was driving around DC frantic looking for me, and I wasn't in any other places he thought I was. So he had to call my mom, and my mom like went off, and then she went off on him again, because she kept asking me why I was rubbing my forehead, and I was like, well, it hurts. And she was like, why? I said, Daddy hit me. So she picked up the phone and went off on him again. So my mom, so I ended up my dad, he put me out, so I ended up living with my mom throughout high school. And I didn't talk to my dad. If I would ask my mom for something, and if she said, call your father and ask, and I was like, I don't want it. So I went almost the entire 4 years of high school, not really communicate with my father. If my mom didn't have it, I was like, well, I guess I won't have it, because it just wasn't something that I wanted to do. So it's interesting because I went to 3 different churches at the same time, because I went to a Catholic school. When I was with my dad, he took me to a Baptist church, and my mom went to a non-denominational church. So it was interesting because my mom was like, oh, well, I made an appointment with the pastor at the church. I'm like, why? Oh, so he can talk to you. I was like, about what? So I was like, I don't need him in my business. I'm gay, not possessed. I don't understand what this conversation is for. And she's like, well, you know what the Bible says, blah, blah, blah. And I guess she forgot that I also grew up in a church. So I said, well, isn't, God an all-loving God? And I started spitting verses back at her because I read. And so she gets upset and just dropped the conversation. I just walked off. So it was something, so to my family, I was a lesbian. I was kind of out in high school as a lesbian, but I identified more as bisexual because I still found men attractive. But I also didn't understand, because I found like everybody attractive, like gay men, straight men, trans men, just there. And it's just a constant change. My wife will tell you sometimes I wake up and she might think she's married to a gay man. Sometimes just, I don't know, like I'm just all over the place sometimes. So I'm just all over the place. But so that's why I identify more as agender, because that's the one that more or less fits me the most in terms of what I identify as. I mean, I'm now married to a trans woman. Sorry for outing you, babe, but I love you. So, I mean, and that was also like another coming out to my family, because they really don't understand it and they see it as a heterosexual relationship. I'm like, that's, no. Because I don't identify as either male or female. So I'm like, you have it wrong. Like, it's a marriage, it's a relationship. Like, it just is. Like, it doesn't really need a label, if that makes any sense. And I think that's what the biggest problem is people get caught up on labels and definitions instead of just realizing that things just are. Yeah.
Thank you, panel, for your responses. Next question, what do you want people in the majority to know about your experiences as an LGBTQ person at Shepherd? So again, what do you want people in the majority to know about your experiences as an LGBTQ person at Shepherd?
Are we all answering this? Or?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, we can.
That's fine.
I'm sure they're tired.
That's a great question. I mean, because I really have only like come out to a handful of people except for tonight. I don't think that I can say that my personal experience at Shepherd was positive or negative. All the people that I did tell, it was very positive, have been very supportive. I do think that in comparison to other places that I've been, this is a very supportive atmosphere and environment. Not to say that it's perfect and that I haven't heard or witnessed people using some terms and saying some things that were insulting and degrading, but my experience has been pretty positive. It's been good.
So I finished my doctorate in 2000, and my partner and I wanted to stay in the DC area, and so started looking at what institutions did I not know about in the area. And at that time we drove out to Shepherd, and because I had never even heard of Shepherd College at the time, and we drove out here, and the first thing that we saw was on German Street, all the rainbow flags in the businesses. And my dissertation is on gay identity development, and what I found from the students and kind of my own experience was those signs and symbols play a powerful role in saying that the environment is going to be one that could possibly be safe. There were no jobs at Shepherd in 2000, so we moved to Boston. And then 9/11 happened, and we ended up moving back to the DC area, and there was a job available at Shepherd. And because we had traveled out here, it was something that was a no-brainer for me to apply for the assistant vice president position in student affairs. And luckily, I snowed the faculty and staff who interviewed me, and they hired me. And so that was 2000, I interviewed in 2002 and started in January of 2003. And I think one of the things that I would say about Shepherd is that it was correct in that they were and are welcoming environment. But what I would say is that as a staff member and then now as a faculty member for 8 years, I still am not sure that we have convinced the leadership that it's okay to be out as faculty and staff. And so I have been out ever since I came because that's something in my own values that I wouldn't, as of 1991, I was not going to kind of hide that part of my identity. But I do know that it's still unsafe for so many people, and as welcoming as Shepherd is, I would have us think about what are we doing and what we're not doing for faculty and staff who might want to come out but cannot. So.
Well, for me, like officially coming out at Shepherd, I mean, I had a really good experience having all those people around me supporting me, but I have to say that I do feel, it's not that I'm tired of explaining what asexuality is, because I'll explain to anyone who's willing to listen. I'm willing to educate people, but I'm tired of I've gotten a lot of people just being like, well, you haven't met the right person yet. That's not a thing. You're a plant, stuff like that. And it's there are some people who mean well, but there are some people who don't mean well. I had someone tell me it was anonymous, but I had someone tell me I was a disappointment to my family bloodline because I didn't want to have sex and procreate, which, first off, I have a brother, so he's got that covered. But I mean, second, wow, I'm a disappointment. There are some things that I've learned to brush things off, but I've also learned, that it's some things, yeah, they're harmful, and I kind of wish, I have had a good experience at Shepherd. I haven't had any person outright to my face be like, you're a disappointment to your family, blah, blah. But I feel the stigma sometimes. And I just, I want people to be educated. When someone's trying to talk to you about hey, I'm feeling, this or that, listen, kind of really listen, and don't be like, well, you can't feel that because X, Y, Z. Just say, okay, I'm here for you. Even if you don't understand, just make sure you're here for that person. That's kind of.
She took mine.
Sorry.
Yeah. Because of how much I was challenged, I guess, the question I got most was well, how do you know coming out? If someone tells you or shows you who they are, believe them. Something that I've always tried to live by, both in personality characteristics and also now I'm going to apply it to this. Because telling someone that, even if they're out, if I told someone that I'm a lesbian, which is what I still usually tell people, they're gonna believe me. But I don't know. They're showing a vulnerability, and I feel like when you challenge that, it's not taking advantage, but it's like a lack of respect for who they are and their evaluation of self. When I told my mom, I was 16, which meant that I couldn't know myself at age 16. And yeah, I had been struggling with that for months, and she was just like, that can't be it, that can't be final. But if they're deciding to tell you, they know. Even in my case, in the way of gender where I don't know, I know. And so telling someone makes you vulnerable, and if you prod in a way that isn't tell me where you came to that, I guess, if it's not respectful, then it's just hurting. It's just pain. And even if that's not the intent, I mean, at least on my part, it's just, why do it, man? So, yeah, that it.
Could you repeat the question?
What do you want people in the majority to know about your experiences as an LGBTQ person at Shepherd?
I think it's just important to make sure if you're an ally that you're doing more listening than talking on the situation. Because while you might have someone that is a part of the LGBT community in your family or a close friend, you personally don't have that experience that someone in the actual community has. So when you hear someone that is in the community talking about the community, you should take their word more so than your own, to be honest. Not saying that if you're an ally, don't speak up at all, but just make sure that you know you're not speaking over someone that is a part of the community.
All right. Okay. Well. Okay. Well, I guess my experience. I think I've had, I would say, different experiences here at Shepherd. When I first came to Shepherd, I would say the climate was a little off, for me anyway. And I only say that because it's one, I don't know, I don't even know if I shared this story before. But there was one night, like I was coming back from I was out with some friends and we were crossing on High Street. By the way, that crosswalk doesn't exist anymore, so you should use the underpass. But walking that way, and I guess I wasn't walking across the street fast enough for the person in the car because they beeped their horn and called me a faggot. And I remember and it was interesting because my friend was more upset than I think I was, probably because I've heard that term before. Like, it wasn't the first time someone's called me that. And she was also on MLT, and she asked if she could share my story with the group and actually had a conversation about it. And I think that's a story that's important to share because this only happened in 2009, 2010. So while it's a couple of years ago, it's still recent. So it's just, but since I've come back to Shepherd, it's changed a lot, but I've also heard stories from people who are of the community, from not so pleasant encounters from students, maybe even staff who are on the campus. So it's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And while I like the term allies, I think I like the term advocate more, because to me, advocate, there's action behind it, and positive action behind it. And I think we need more advocating on this campus for a lot of minority groups in general. So I think that's something that I would like this group to at least take away from it. While it's great to be an ally, I think it's even more beneficial for any community to have advocates who are willing to not only listen to the stories but find ways to help and help promote healthy and safer environments.
Thank you. So, final question. Describe one improvement you would suggest for Shepherd University to strengthen our community around inclusion.
Just one.
Or more.
Or more. I think that I would really love to see, and I think Allies is a great group and I'm glad we have them, but I would like to see just more of a celebration of the LGBT community, just events that not are just about where we sit here and we're, raising awareness and talking about things, but something that would be we're proud and we're happy to have this type of culture here at our campus. So yeah.
When we got the questions early, so we were trying to think, and this was something that I really struggled with, trying to think about what we might want to do. And I think it is really kind of some of the words that people have already used here is the advocacy part, and then really celebrating the diversity around sexual orientation and gender identity in ways that go beyond wonderful programs like this, but really thinking about how do we continue to reflect on our policies and procedures that may impact so many people, including students and faculty and staff. And in what I think about is we could be a leader in the state around these issues because I do think we have a fairly progressive campus and a supportive campus, and I think that we have lost some opportunities that I think we still have chances to gain back to kind of dispel the stereotypes that come with the word West Virginia beyond the state, but also just showing the pride that we respect diversity in so many different ways that certainly could be a way that we could maybe recruit through admissions students who feel like they could come to this campus and be who they are in ways that they may not have thought a campus would be able to do. So.
I definitely think more events, more education about LGBTQ issues would be really important, like more safe zone training. Like that helped me, and I'm part of the community, and safe zone training, like learning more, like really helped me. Just kind of even like getting allies, like those people like that, like involved, people who may not be within the community, because like I know a lot of people are really like nervous about talking about it, nervous about, you know, I had a friend once who was like, you know, I don't know this person's gender, I don't know how to, you know, what pronouns do I use? And I was like, just ask them what pronouns they use. Just say, hey, you know, what pronouns can I use with you? And they're like, it's that easy? I was like, yeah, just don't be weird about it, you know? Like, just, you know, like kind of, like it's hard to do, and I know it would take a long time, but like, you know, just kind of normalize that kind of language and, you know, talking. Just talk about it. I want to have more, like, maybe not even like formal events like this panel, like even just like little meetups, like, hey, let's all talk about kind of our experiences and stuff like that. I think that would be good.
As the main thing, and I've said this to a couple people, I don't know if they're gonna start it, because I've heard that they will. Making safe zone training required for incoming RAs, and I guess the current RAs that haven't had it. Just because why can't, your wing should be a safe space. Like that shouldn't, I don't know if anyone else in my building is safe zone trained. I know that I am, and while people can talk to the other RAs, they probably don't know that they can, because it's not hanging outside of their door. And I feel like a building, and each wing of a building, should feel like a completely safe space, or safe zone, if you will. And then off of what Ashley just said with like normalizing asking for pronouns, I'm also VP of Chemistry Society, and we were doing introductions one day, and they're like, how should we, like, what should we say? And then I like added pronouns to the list. And one person was like, why? Why would we do that? And that was before I said exclusively they, them, and so I was just like, she or they. And the person was just like, okay, so she, and I'm like, okay, not. But yeah, just normalizing that, because, yeah, I don't know, yep.
I would say that having more resources for education is a good idea. The more exposure there is, the more people can learn about the LGBT community. I also think, as a lot of other people have said, I think safe spaces on campus, more safe spaces is a good idea. And again, with the education, I think we could help teach other students or other people on campus to just make sure that the area that you're in is a safe space for people. Me personally, I have had threats of violence on campus, and I know that that's made me very uncomfortable. There's times when I didn't even want to come to campus because I was afraid something would happen if I was walking by myself, even daytime. So I think just making campus feel like it's more safe is a good idea.
Programming, especially for like coming out week, there should be an entire week of coming out, or at least some type of pride. I was just sitting here thinking like, yeah, like a rave would be awesome. But even like just keeping, having like up-to-date resources and keeping the educational components going, and not forgetting that every day somebody is coming out. And it's not just a week that everyone just decides that they're going to come out at one time. It's like something that happens all the time. But really, I think, because I'm going to go back to when I first came to Shepherd. Like, coming out week was like an entire week of awesomeness. Like, it was just like something that, like, the entire week, and every day there was something happening, there was something going on, there was something someone can go to and get educated. And we've lost that. Sometimes you forget that it's coming out week. So I think something like that, just to make it memorable and make it, because that, like, seeing coming out week, like, and how it was like a thing, like, that really made me feel comfortable on campus. And I think having stuff like that, and I think it would draw more people, and it'll educate more people, and it give people the opportunity to not be as afraid to ask those questions that they need answers to, instead of just like assuming the wrong thing. But I definitely think we need to incorporate it in more things, just in general.
Can I have any more questions?
No.
I also think it's important because there are a lot of gay people on this campus. You might not know how many gay people are actually on this campus because you might only have a select group of people that you're friends with, but there are a lot of gay people on this campus. And I feel like the best thing that we could do is we could try and get all the different types of like social groups, I guess, on campus, cliques if you will, to have like a unifying purpose. And if you are in the LGBT community, that should be a unifying purpose. Like, in Allies, like, we have our Allies group, but there's also like theater people that are gay that might not have more of a club background, I guess is the word I'm looking for, like athletes, things like that. Like, I feel like there is sort of a disconnect between the different groups of people on campus. And I feel like the best way to create a more friendly and safe campus is to have everyone be cool with each other. So yeah, just be cool.
Thank you. What a great way to end. Can we thank our panel again for being here? I just remind us that while this may be coming out day, and this might be a week of focus, the reality of our identities just don't show up as little blips at a time in our life. We live with our identities, and I, for one, strongly believe that there are larger system challenges. So one system challenge that I'm taking on with the rest of a committee of folks, and this is a challenge that Dr. Stevens may remember from a few years ago, are class rosters. So if you teach at Shepherd, you receive a class roster, usually 2 to 3 times in a given semester, and those rosters include a person's legal first name, legal last name. There's no space for preferred name. There's no space for pronouns. Now, technically, it's just words on a page that can be added, so the computer science behind it is pretty elementary. At least I think it is, and therefore it is. But it's something that as a university we need to make a commitment to do just that. So it's just one little example. So I hope that from our place of power we will seek to make change to better support our students and our staff and faculty. So Thank you again.